If we can get started, and hopefully it's a topic that everyone will be somewhat interested in anyway. It's early spring vegetable gardening. We talked something about vegetable gardening last month, excuse me, not last week. But, seems like this was something that would lead into it, and really this would have been better about 2 or 3 weeks ago, because we are beginning to warm up, and a lot of these things you can plant in February, believe it or not. Most people think you can't start a vegetable garden until it starts getting warm in March or April. Well, actually, a lot of these things you can start in February, believe it or not. But first of all, if you're going to do gardening, like most of us have done in the past, and that's out in the yard or out on the farm somewhere, you got to prepare the soil, you got to dig it up, and have to get it right, and make sure you got the right components in the soil, get it loose enough to where it's workable, and then you can start planting. And that's done by mixing compost and into the original soil. You don't want it all compost, you don't want it just clay either, because things most times don't grow too well. Basic green thermos, 2 inches of organic matter and 6 inches of soil. That's not bad, because it's going to make it loose enough, it's going to absorb water, it's going to hold the nutrients well, the roots are going to grow well in it, and it'll be a good way to go. I haven't done this in about 2 years, so if I start thumbing around, I apologize on the beginning. Too much organic matter can be counterproductive, because it can limit the plant growth, because it's a little bit too rich. If you have heavy clay, wet clay, your plants don't do well either, so some combination of the two works a lot better. If you're starting in the spring, it's still a good idea to get the soil and the compost mixed in well. Composted organic material create healthy grow root zone. Green matter that hasn't been composted, hasn't been aged, let me put it that way, does not do well either. It needs to have been gone through a heat process and beginning to break down before it mixing into the soil and the plants do well. Compost bin, if you can take your kitchen vegetable matter, put them in a garbage can or out in a pile in the yard, that works well. Then you can take that compost and mix it in with the soil in your garden, and it works extremely well. Some people I have seen take, if they are really into it, take pallets, excuse me, thank you. Take those pallets, and they use 3 of them, one here, one here, and one here. They make kind of a compost bin using those pallets. So, and that works well. If you're going to do a lot, if you're going to do a little bit, you can use a garbage can, punch some holes in the sides and the bottom of it with a plastic, maybe line it with a plastic bag, punch a few holes in, put it in there, and it will age and start to break down. Cold crops are early season, like January and February. You can actually start some plants in January, believe it or not. It's things like turnip greens, mustard, cabbage, spinach. Master Gardener program 2 or 3 years ago had an idea that they were going to grow some spinach. So in February they went out and planted a plot of spinach on the grounds over at the Extension Center. And they had a nice crop of spinach, and it grew well, and then it started getting June, July, started getting hot and warm, and the spinach then started to peter out. But it was still there, still green, fair, but it wasn't producing anything. Started getting fall and started getting cool, well, the spinach started to come back out. That spinach then, because it had a good root system, and December, January, February grew like rip. It looked like weeds almost. It was because it was growing so well. And so that they're not commonly thought of as being a perennial type of plant, but They were spinach there for a couple of years. So it lived through snow, it lived through frost, it lived through cold weather, it lived through heavy rain. So it was growing in January and doing well. So that's one of them. You can plant a lot of those seeds directly in the soil. You don't have to do the plants. Plants like kohlrabi, kale, collards, Chinese kale, peas, onions, radishes, spinach, lettuce, and turnips. They will all work well when in cold weather. So you can do those. Cabbage, broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, best started about 4 or 5 weeks before you start putting them outside, but they can go in before the frost stops. You can go them in late February, early March, and they will do okay. Peppers, not too well. They have to go in. They will do a cold weather okay, but not frosty weather. Cold weather, I'm talking about 40, 45 degrees, but you start getting frost then around 37 and 38 degrees. Greenhouse or hot box is a good place to start those so that you can get them started. Usually find greens at the supermarket, wrapped in plastic bags. I don't ever buy any, but I gotta get some fresh ones. I don't like those that are in plastic bags that they've been there God only knows how long. So arugula is a plant that you can grow. It's one that I've never grown, but it's one that you can. Make sure to plant those for fresh, constant supply greens in the spring. What vegetable is better signal coming out than asparagus? Asparagus is not something you're really going to plant this year and harvest this year. It really is what would be considered to be a perennial. You plant to get the roots into the soil in the early spring, and it'll start to grow. You may have a few spears that will come up. You could harvest those, but then back for the next 5 or 6 years, they will be coming up early in the spring, and you can be harvesting your own asparagus out of a small plot, say 3 by 4, probably give you enough for your family to have asparagus once or twice a week during the spring. It will cut back then when warm weather starts because it will want to mature, send up large stems. They'll be tough, and it will want to put out blooms. Believe it or not, it does bloom, and start putting out seed so that it will can start some more plants. But those you can let them grow. You can then midsummer, late summer, you can cut them back and then get it ready for the winter. It's a good nutritious vegetable so that it's something that you can grow. Beets, they grow well. Beets are something that came, I believe, from the Netherlands, and of course their weather is a little bit cooler than ours, and so it's a good cool plant. You could grow them. You can grow them for. Some people eat the leaves. I've never eaten beet leaves, but I've eaten beets all my life. Leaves would kind of. Don't think I would go that well, but I've eaten beets that are raw. I've eaten beets that were just cooked on the top of the stove. I've eaten pickled beets. I've eaten beets just about any way that you want to put beets out. So that's a good plant, and it will sow the seed indoors, grow them under lights for about a month, and before the last frost, then you can put the roots out, and when the soil is workable. You can grow beets in containers, and I don't know how many of you have ever heard me talk about container gardening, but I have a small yard. I have, I think it's 75 by 125, so that's not very big, and I got a house that's a 3-bedroom house and a garage and a deck and a back porch and front porch and driveway and all that, so it doesn't leave me an awful lot of dirt to put in a garden. and they really don't want me putting in a garden because of the neighborhood rules. So I said, well, when I went in that and bought that house, I said I'd like to grow some vegetables, but they won't let me put in a garden. So I got in the mail something one day called Earthbox. I said, what's Earthbox? And I said, I think I'll buy one. Well, that one was $29.95 plus $5 shipping. So I ordered it. It came, and it was an interesting box. It was a plastic box. It had a false bottom in it with holes in it. It had a hole in the side of the box. And I said, how's this going to work? So I started reading the instructions. And it's a box within a box, what it amounts to. So it's got a false bottom inside that holds the soil above a water level. So you put the water down through a tube into the bottom, and it absorbs water up from the bottom rather than pouring it on top. So if any of you are ever interested, go on your computer and look up Earthbox. It's a fantastic problem. I have grown tomatoes that weigh 1.5 pounds a piece. I have one that is that I made made out of you've been to Walmart and seen these plastics, little gray plastic storage boxes that you can store things in, and I made one out of that. It holds about 10 gallons. I planted one of those in the 1st of September one year in bush beans, green beans. I said, I don't know if they'll even come up and before frost or not. Well, they did, and was lucky. My wife and I ate green beans 3 meals a week for 6 weeks out of a container that was, well, it was about that long and about that wide. It was amazing. I've grown tomatoes. I've grown squash, I've grown cucumbers, I've grown okra, I've grown lettuce, I've grown cabbage, I've grown, well, like I said, tomatoes and green beans. And you can, if you have a problem too small, you can set those around on your patio. You can set them around behind a fence. They're convenient in that you can plant lettuce in them. Lettuce does not like a lot of hot sun. It likes sun in February, March, and April. May, June, July, it starts to peter out and starts to wilt and die. You can plant lettuce in one of those containers like that and move it around in the shade, and you'll have lettuce for another month. So you can't very well move your garden, but you can a box or a container. You can actually do container gardening in 5-gallon buckets, big pots, but I really enjoy the Earthbox because it's real good. A lot of times you have to, if you're doing it in a regular, in a regular pot or container, you may have to go in and water plants every day. Earthbox, you may have to water. I have one summer when it was extremely hot, and I was growing tomatoes in one of those earth boxes. And it was about July or August, and I was growing 1.5 pounds tomatoes in that box. I put water in it about every third day. So you don't, it doesn't take an awful lot of water. You don't have to constantly be carrying water and putting water on it because the box works well. I'm not a commercial salesman for Earthbox, but that's the name that I use. I make my own, so anyway, I don't know what they call it. I think I saw one at a farm co-op one year for, I think it was selling that one for about $75. I don't know why they were, but you can make them a lot cheaper. Peas, you can grow peas. You can start peas in the latter part of February. They will take a little frost, a little cold weather. I even had peas one time that after it had snowed. The peas did fine, no problem. You grow them in the spring, vegetable garden for a good fresh supply of peas. Carrots, Carrots, you can grow carrots just about anywhere. It's you can, 5-gallon bucket will grow several carrots. An earth box grows carrots extremely well. They grow, well, you can plant the seed and they will start coming up, and plant the seed around in February, and they will start coming up, and they will still survive light frost. They don't survive heavy frost real well, but they do light frost. Rabbits love carrots. You've seen cartoons where the rabbit's holding a carrot and chomping on it. Well, they like them just about that well. Clover is a weird thing that may sound weird. They will go to the clover rather than the carrot. So if you have a little patch of clover in your yard, set your carrot bucket or container in the middle of the clover, and they'll eat the clover instead of the carrots. I don't think I would be doing an awful lot of celery in this part of the world. I have been in Canada at one time about 50 years ago, and I saw fields of celery. I had said, celery in a field? They must have been 5 acres of celery. And it was amazing. They were beginning to dig the celery. And literally, I mean, they were digging it, because it was, what they do is they plant it, they grow it, start it growing, and then they bring the soil up closer to it. That makes the plant grow tall. So they have to wash the dirt off of them, off the stem. So just the leafy green part is all you ever see in the field until they start digging it. Then you see the long stalks. Chard is something I don't know anything about, but it is one of those vegetables that you can grow. Chard, like I said here, it's basically grown more in Australia than anywhere else. They work well in an edible landscape, and that's where I could plant a vegetable garden in my landscape and nobody would say anything about it. I could grow green beans in my landscape and with my shrubs and my other plants, but I can't dig up a spot and say, this is my green bean plot. This is my cabbage plot. No, I can mix it in with my regular landscape plants and it would be fine. So it's chard would be one of those that I might put in as a green leafy plant, but it would be something I could go out and eat. Fennel is another one that I've never grown, but it is one of those plants that you can grow. It repels bugs, it says here. You'll love the seed from the fennel, which can dry. It's a natural flavor. And then garlic. Garlic is something kind of like onions. They will grow basically any time when it's cool. They love cool weather better than they do hot weather. Onions, I have seen onions growing 12 months out of the year. It's better if it's cool weather. It's okay, you can put your onion plants in the soil in around October. They will start to grow and they will continue to grow, and they do well during January, February, and March. And you can go out and have your fresh onions. You can have just those that, you know, are the small green ones that you can put in your salad do well, or the big bulbs onions that you can cook with. Kale is another one. It does well in the freezer. Supermarkets had a lot of chemicals that can be used. Karobi, leeks. Leeks basically is a variety of onion, but it is doesn't have the bulb that you usually see in onions. Lettuce will grow. Plant lettuce in late August. It will start coming up, will not do well until around November, and then it will grow all winter until about May of next year. So it's one of those cool weather plants that loves the cool weather. It doesn't like hot weather. It likes cool, moist. Not wet, but moist. So it's, you can grow lettuce actually indoors. Radishes, another thing kind of like turnips. They have the bulb, make a good companion for vegetables. Green beans, green peas. Peas particularly you can start latter part of February. They will come up and survive frost, and then they will do well and start maturing and providing your peas in April, late early May. So you can go that way. I don't think I've eaten raw green peas, but that says here that you can. And spinach I've already talked about spinach. I won't go any further in spinach. Shallots basically are nothing but onions, and there's a different way of planting them. They are the small bulb that you plant rather than going by seed. So you can plant the bulbs. Early February would be a good time. They will get in the ground, start to set out their root, and start growing then the latter part of February and early part of March. Scallions basically is another onion. And crops, vegetables are classified as warm season, cool season. Your green beans are a good example of a good warm season. Potatoes is one that we didn't talk about here, but they will can go into the ground in March. I don't know, I've seen pictures of, and one time I saw some growing in a bucket, so that they will grow. You can grow them in your garden. I grew up on a farm down south of here, about 50 miles, and my dad would plant 2 rows of potatoes every year. And they would come up and they would send out their runners, and you'd dig them up and you'd have all the potatoes. We'd have potatoes roughly for 8, 9, 10 months out of the year from those that we grew in the garden. So potatoes are something, they will start not in February, but in March. They can go into the ground, and by the time the sprout comes up and out of the ground, it will be probably the 1st of April, and they will survive them from there on.
Does that go for sweet potatoes?
I'm sorry?
Does that go for sweet potatoes?
No, sweet potatoes are a little different plant. Sweet potato came from Africa, so it takes a little bit warmer season than the what we call the Irish potato. That potato came from up in the northern part of Europe, so it's our Irish potato, as we call it, came from up there, so it takes a cooler season. But the sweet potato came from Africa, which is a little bit more warm than up there. There is a list back here on the back page that gives you an idea of some of the vegetables that you can grow in your garden. It tells you the variety, the plant interval. This page came from the University of Tennessee. So it's basically for Tennessee property owners, Tennessee growers, and it gives you the seed to plant, how deep they should be, when the first time you should plant them, and I would recommend that you kind of take a good look at that and see what you can find out. I gave you I've been passing around a list of PowerPoint topics. Got it there. What I was wanting to do was everybody to take a look at it, and that's a list of topics that I've got that I can present for the next month or so. If they've already given me a topic to work on, I guess I'll have to go with that one since they've advertised it. But if I can get a list from you, I can find out what I've got that would sound good and would work.